Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Mr. Robin's Hood podcast. Today, we have an exceptionally special guest joining us, but hold that thought for just a moment. I'm Robin Howeiler, though you might know me as Mr. Robin, here alongside my creative partner and number one go-to, though for what specifically I can't quite say, Mikkel Murray Robinson, who you probably recognize as Mikey on the mic. Let me do that one again. All right, let's go. We're here today with a special guest who will share her poignant experiences as a young girl and survivor of the notorious Black Sunday on April 14th, 1935, during the harrowing Dust Bowl era of the 1930s. Please join me in welcoming Jeanie Thorn. Jeanie, it is truly an honor to have you with us on this podcast today.
Thank you.
If I'm not mistaken, you reside here in Woodward now.
Yes.
Okay. We would be grateful if you could share just a few moments. Let me back up and do that one again. We would be grateful if you could spare a few moments to delve into the chapters of your life and recount your remarkable journey.
Okay. I was born in 1932, a fall day in September, and I was born on a farm homesteaded by my grandfather, J.K. Tomlinson, in 1905. And I was born in the same house that my mom was born in. And I grew up, my first 12 years was spent in that house. We had a side for us and a side for my grandparents. And the first thing I remember about the house was my grandma and I were kind of special. And she cut a little hole in the door, in the wall, so I could crawl through. And I went in there a lot of times to get away from a whipping.
Yeah, right.
And then as I grew, the door grew. And it was still there when we moved in the early 40s.
So where was that house located?
7 miles west of Raiden, Oklahoma. Okay. And they came there from Weatherford, Oklahoma. My mother had 3 half-brothers and sister. Mm-hmm. And then she had one sister, and that was the family. And that's where my favorite memories are. My grandparents were special to me.
Yeah.
And, I watched my granddad out in the field. And, of course, my dad worked in the fields, too. But it seemed like Granddad struggled more. And I don't know how they came to come to Woodward. He bought 2 places or homesteaded on 2 places. One was this section, and the other was across the road and a mile down. And that's, that we grew cattle and raised cattle, and we, of course, traveled, didn't have a car,
right.
Electricity, phone, nothing, bathroom. And we traveled, we were 2 miles over in Texas, and we traveled across to the Oklahoma line about once a week with a team of mules and a wagon to get our mail from Raiden, Oklahoma. And then later years, they let, and I don't know why, but they let the Oklahoma deliver our mail over in Texas. And we always got our mail from Oklahoma.
That's interesting.
And there was a little town, Rankin, and I have a story in one of my books about Rankin, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And the railroad went where Raden's at. And so Rankin moved to Raden. And that's
I know this story. Yeah.
And so we went every Saturday by wagon when I was a little kid growing up to sell cream and eggs and shop for necessities. And I remember it was my granddad and grandma more. And I remember my granddad couldn't wait to get the mules unhitched and the feed buckets out and then hit the ice cream store. And that old building is still there.
Really?
And he would eat a lot of ice cream, and we would usually get 50 pounds of ice, put in an old wash tub and wrap it in a quilt, take it home, and we had good old iced tea for a few days. And then we would have maybe a little freezer of ice cream. And so that's my first memories of the home place, and I still call it the home place.
Mm-hmm.
I still go by there once in a while, and there's still trees that I remember as I was growing up.
That's really neat.
I climbed every tree in the country and knew
Same.
every bird nest, and
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting. I'm familiar with Raden. I've been there several times. So as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about it in the present day as I know it, So it's interesting to hear your take on the home place.
And another thing that happened, now this was before my time, in 1905, I think. There's an old shinner knoll between the Texas, before you get to the Oklahoma line from our place, and where that curve's at. I don't know whether you've ever been over the curve or not. But there was a prairie fire, and my great-granddad, was caught on a horse and burned to death in that shinner knoll.
Oh, no.
And, when I see the prairie fires, I think of that too.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure.
And he's buried at the White Rose Cemetery near Raden.
That's interesting that all of that back to your great-grandfather.
I have a lot of history, back through the years of the grandparents on both sides, and I'm kind of a history freak.
Yeah. Well, that's great. We kind of are too. We think that's fascinating. Tell us a little bit, now that we've talked about the home place, and I know when the Dust Bowl was happening, you were living on that home place. So that's
Right.
part of tell us a little bit about your experience during the Dust Bowl and particularly Black Sunday. I know you have some pretty vivid memories.
I have a special vivid memory of the Black Sunday. My grandparents had gone to Illinois to visit his ancestors and everybody. And so it was just my dad, my mom, and I there by ourselves. Beautiful day, kind of like this with no wind.
Mm-hmm.
And long about, I don't know, of course, I'll say 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Our house and then our shed was probably a good block from the house.
Mm-hmm.
And we were about halfway between. And I could remember so vivid standing between my mom and dad and holding their hands and them watching the cloud come in from the north. And there was still no wind, no nothing. And it was just black. That one picture in my book kind of depicts what it looks like with it just rolling. And they didn't know what to do. Everybody thought the world was coming to an end.
Yeah.
Because with no electricity, no radio station, no nothing. And then anyway, it rolled in, and it just was quietly rolling in and settled. We went to the cellar. They decided we'd go to the cellar. And it got so bad you couldn't breathe. It was just solid dust.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my dad smoked, rolled his own, and he had lighted a cigarette, and you could, sitting right next to him, or on his lap even, could barely, it was so thick you couldn't hardly see that match.
Wow.
And he, of course, knew his way to the stock tank, which was not too far away. And he had some old gunny sacks, cotton sacks, whatever. And we had steps going down into the cellar, and then he would hang that in the door going into the cellar to help us breathe. He'd dip it in the stock tank, and it was wet. And, this lasted pretty well all night, I think.
Is that right? Wow.
And when we went back in the house, I bet I can remember dust everywhere, like an inch thick on the floors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the grandparents, they're part of the story too. They were caught at El Reno.
Oh.
Off of Route 66. And there was other people caught there too. And they pulled into a windmill, and there was a stock tank. Of course, they thought the world was coming to an end too. And they held hands, all these families that didn't know each other, and just gathered around that stock tank, or probably praying, and stayed there while it was settling in and everything. Mm-hmm. And that's all I remember about that. But and then they made it home okay.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that they made it home. But yeah, that would have been a scary experience. Definitely one that would settle in your mind no matter how old you were. Because you had told me like 3 or 4.
I had to be if it was 35.
Yeah, and you were born in 32, yeah. So,
interesting. I'm kind of interested in it was kind of a compounding thing. So you had the Dust Bowl kind of layered up on top of the Great Depression, which affected the entire nation. And I'm kind of interested in some of your memories of living through the Depression and particularly out here, where not only are you having to deal with the Great Depression, but you've got constant, the dust storms coming through.
And I remember a lot about those years. Of course, as a little kid, I don't remember bad things.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I never thought as us being poor, we always had food. And we raised a lot of chickens, pigs, butchered pigs, hogs or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And we never had beef. I don't remember ever having beef till I was, in my teens.
But you raised cattle, but you never had beef?
And I've tried to think. They killed cattle during that time, and the government paid you to kill them. So I think it was because they didn't have anything to eat, and they were so skinny and
sure.
And starved, And I, of course, both of my parents were from big families. My dad had 13 siblings and my grandma 5, or my mother 5. And you never knew when you were going to have company. And they'd roll in on Sunday, and maybe several families would be there. And grandma she canned, and mother, and they would just kill a chicken and another chicken and put it in the skillet and fry it. And we had plenty to eat with milk and to make gravy. And then, I was very close to all my cousins. I had 40 cousins.
Oh, wow.
And 41st, or 41. And then I think there's 5 of us left.
Wow.
And I stay in touch with their second generation quite a bit. But I remember we had an old sycamore tree at the back of the house, and it was about dead. And they would get a branding iron and brand their initials on that. That stayed there for years. I had a swing on one of the trees made out of rope, and my dad got an old board and put the seed in it. And then my mother and sister, my sister was born in 1937, so she had to, I don't know how old she was, but anyway, they got strep throat real bad. And that was before sulfa or antibiotics. And they experimented on my mom and my sister with sulfa drug,
Mm-hmm.
and they got well.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of and didn't bother me. I'm still here. Then, of course, the Saturdays with the mules going to raiding was just a common thing. They milked several head of cattle, and they separated the cream and those old separators. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That has all the discs and everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they'd have sometimes a 10-gallon can of cream when we'd go.
Wow.
And
And so they would sell that?
sell that to buy the flour. And
Oh, I see.
So, do you remember what they were selling their cream for?
no, I don't. I'd like to. I'd
Right.
like to.
Right? That would be
Not very much, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wondered if you happened to get that knowledge at some point.
And there was another thought that came in there, but and we grew. But during the Dust Bowl, you really couldn't grow a garden that much.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you probably did, other than those years. Did you guys have a garden
Yes.
outside of the Dust Bowl?
Always.
So when you had a garden, and you said that your mom and your grandma both canned, did you find that you were kind of using up some of those cans that you had canned from a previous season, and were like,
And they were all stored in the cellar.
Yeah. Did you ever remember having to ration any of it, or did your family ever?
Well, I remember the rationing. But back to the canning, let me tell you a story about my mom.
Okay.
That was after we moved, and it was later. But it was my dad brought my mom and my sister back to Allison, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and left us for a week so she could can peaches. And my grandparents always had a huge orchard, like a block.
Oh, wow.
And they canned many jars of peaches. But anyway, that was when sugar was rationed, and she had to use syrup to can. And she had a pressure cooker, and I'll never forget that day. That she had the pressure cooker, she set it off the stove, and as she opened it, two of the jars exploded from the syrup. And, she filled them too full, and that didn't work like sugar. And it blew up in her face. It burned her face all the way down her arm and down her leg.
Oh, my.
And, of course, we didn't even have a car then because my dad had taken the car back. And my cousin was there with her husband was in service because this was after the war had started.
Mm-hmm.
And she was there visiting with Grandma. And she and I know it's about 2 miles to the neighbor's house, and got their daughter-in-law's old pickup, and then went another mile farther, and they had a better car. And then they came back and got my mom and took her to Wheeler to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And she lay there and suffered. That arm was just,
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah. Burn is a bad wound to get, and they take a long time to heal.
Yeah. And hers even, I can remember it smelling.
Yeah.
But that was a terrible thing with canning. I never was much of a canner.
Yeah, definitely after that. Goodness. Did you get cut by some of the glass too, or?
It was just as fine. There was glass and peaches all on the ceiling, and just real fine.
Real fine.
But she had one little bloody spot on her nose, but it even went up in her nostril, her lips.
Huh.
It's a wonder she even survived from it. But that was a result of, I guess, depression and war and everything.
Right. The rationing of the sugar.
And then talking about the rationing, we had stamps to buy. Coffee was rationed, and there was a guy at Raiden that hid 100 pounds of sugar back for my dad. And he sneaked it home and hid it in the loft.
Nice.
And I was always afraid somebody'd come and get us, but they didn't.
Over that, yeah.
And nylon hose was another thing that was rationed. And and then another thing, back to the depression. I'm jumping around.
Oh, you're fine.
You're fine.
Everybody went to California. And so one of my aunts on my dad's side, she and her husband and 3 kids took off to California. And the family's still out there. And then, I don't know how much later, a year maybe, the youngest sister and her husband and 5-year-old boy. She had a daughter that was a year older than me, that was in 1938. And the daughter she stayed with the grandma at Raiden, and the other 4 went in an old car, not knowing where they were going, to California to find work.
Wow.
And my dad was going to come back and get my mom and my sister and I. And, I don't know how long it took them, but that old car had to be a 30s car because it was in the 30s. And there was no way of communication, He went to work they did yard work. He worked for Shirley Temple. And he said she'd come and watch through the fence.
Oh, wow.
He told me stories, could always remember it. But he hated California with a passion. And he hitchhiked. He lost his car while he was out there. I think it wasn't paid for, and he went across the line. And
yeah.
And he hitchhiked back and never left Oklahoma and Texas again. And the other families all stayed in California.
Did they?
I still stay in contact with one of the girls I talk to, second cousin every day.
Yeah. So they're still out in California. But you're still in touch with them. That's cool. Yeah. And this was your dad that did this? Okay. And he just didn't like it out there in California.
No. He hated it. And he left to jerk broom corn or farm maize or things like that. He was a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother worked in the field too. She pulled bolls and cotton, and they all worked hard. And they turned school out for 2 weeks for kids to help their parents with
the
harvest, pulling cotton.
Yeah. Growing up, did you do a lot of chores and contribute a lot to the homestead, to the household?
I was lazy, I guess.
Well, I know that,
a lot of kids did.
A lot of kids that were made to, or had to for their family to be able to.
I think my grandparents just spoiled me, and that was.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there was, some children from that era that got to, enjoy their childhood.
And I loved the outdoors.
Yeah.
Like I said, the trees and the birds. And
yeah, I remember you telling me about that, climbing the trees, because I love to climb the trees, and I'm the same with the birds as well.
And but that California trip, I can't even imagine what that must have been like in an old car and a family and
I mean, that's like an 18-hour drive.
Yeah.
Today,
And of course, they went Route 66.
Right.
That's kind of special to me. I've been on a lot of it. And when they got ready to cross the Arizona-California line, they had bought some fruit somewhere, and they took it away from them because they couldn't take it across the line.
Yeah.
And then my dad said the guard was standing there eating one of the oranges when they drove off.
Yeah, they still do that, actually.
Really? You can't take fruit across state lines?
I didn't know whether you could or not now.
No, they still won't. And they'll stop you.
Huh.
And look in the back of the car, and if they see a cooler, they'll make you open the cooler so they can see
if there's anything in there.
Yeah.
Wild. I guess I've never tried to fruit smuggle.
I helped smuggle a parrot back from old Mexico.
Oh, wow. Now that's a story.
I've got a lot of them, but I still, I'm amazed at the trip to California and the Depression. And when they got there, they would not accept them as it's kind of segregated really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just kind of white trash.
And when they left, and you probably knew a lot of families that went out to California.
Right.
I mean, was it strictly just to try to find job
a better life? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
get away from the winds and
the dust.
Yeah.
And the dust had even the fences were covered with dust.
Right.
And the roads, you couldn't you had to know how to drive in Oklahoma.
I feel like that's still a thing. It's still a thing
now we're just dodging potholes rather than sand dunes.
But
so were a lot of these families, they were losing their farm, the place that they had homesteaded.
And this aunt, they really didn't. They were just a young married couple and didn't really have anything.
Oh, okay.
And my dad did have the home to come back to with my grandparents. So,
so your grandparents kind of and your mom kind of continued the home place and continuing life as
and
it was.
I know my mom milked and the blizzard of 1938, I think, was the 7th and 8th of April. That's the biggest snow I've ever seen. And it covered the clotheslines and everything.
Wow.
But I remember them coming back with the milk and it almost freezing before they'd get to the house.
Oh, wow. From just going out and milking, huh?
And it was a bad time for her as well as my dad. And he talked about Santa Monica a lot. He talked about, different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a chance to go see this one first cousin in Los Angeles in 2010, I think, 2012. And I said, I want to walk that Santa Monica Pier.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my cousins walked it with me. And then I've got a picture in there of that. And then at the bottom of it, it says end of Route 66.
Yeah.
So that was special for me.
Huh.
Yeah, because in 2012 you would have turned 80.
Yeah.
So on your 80th birthday, you got to go do that. That's cool. We never really talked about the books she keeps referring to. They're books that she had put together, kind of genealogy pictures, but then also one of them talks about the Dust Bowl and some of those eras, and that one right there, eras in her life. And you had just recently, kind of how we connected was and I say we, Robin, and then Tom Lucas were working on, because this year, April 14th, was the 90th anniversary of Black Sunday. And I
knew it was,
right, commemorating it, we were putting together a book of stories, and we got your story in there that we're going to be launching soon, we hope. So, but we wanted to talk to you more about it, kind of promote what we're doing there, but listen to your stories. So just to kind of tie it all back together. But you had come and talked to me a little bit about your story, and there's a couple things you had said that you haven't talked about yet. So one of those was the story of you and your sister with the
quilt.
The quilt, yeah. Will you tell that one? I think that's a really memory.
Well, the dirt was so bad, and the wind. I think on one of my notes here, I've got that I get flashbacks of those days and the howling wind and the dust and Route 66 and train whistles in the night.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, you couldn't go outside and play. You couldn't, it just covered the floors. you'd have to clean the table off before you could eat because it was dirty.
Mm-hmm.
But we had this big overstuffed chair, and she and I we'd put a quilt over the chair, and we'd get behind it and make our playhouse and cut out the wind and some of the dust. And I think the picture's in there of that old chair with us sitting in it.
Oh, yeah. We were commenting
on
that photo. It's a great photo.
Yeah, it is. The light exposure in that photo is really unique.
I've got gobs of boxes of pictures that I've savored for the years.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing was the school. I started in 1939, and that was not a good time either. Rode this old bus, which, can you imagine putting your kid 7 miles from town on a bus for the day? And anyway, I had to, where we lived, there was a dirt road that went down this way going east, and they went that way and picked up some kids. Then they came back, and then they came in front of the house and went south. Well, when the bus went to the north of us, I can remember sitting on my grandma's lap and watching for the bus. Then I would walk to the end of the road, which was a good block or two, maybe two, probably, and wait for the bus to come back and pick me up. And there was all ages of kids on there. And it was, I don't remember it being cold. The worst thing about it, I had to wear long stockings. And I hated that. And I'd roll mine down when I got on the bus. And that big roll around my ankle, I'm sure that looked cute. And then at school, we played at recess. I was thinking, we played Red Rover. And
no, you can't.
Then we played jacks.
Yes.
And, and we always had beans to eat at lunch. Or my mom would pack me a lunch in a syrup bucket. And I remember one year I got a new lunchbox for Christmas, and I thought I was really uptown.
Yeah, that's so.
And and I went to Allison School. I started there the first grade. And did you ever know Roy McCoy, the weatherman from Amarillo?
No, sorry.
Anyway, he was my classmate in the first grade.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I went through the first and second grade, and there was only 11 grades in the school.
Yeah.
And they put the 12th grade in, and we got to skip a grade. So I skipped the third grade and went from second to fourth. So that was why when I graduated, I was a 16-year-old when I started. And that was a thrill to get out of 1 year of school. And, I can remember the beans still had rocks in them or pieces of gunny sacks or.
Yeah.
Not very clean.
Yeah. Interesting. So when did your family moved from the home place at some point? You were kind of saying we never.
I was 12 years old when we moved.
And you moved to
Spearman, Texas.
Okay.
And that's where I finished school and graduated and started my family. And there's a long story about why we moved.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you a little bit about it. I mean, it was in the Canadian Record paper not too long ago, so
right.
dear thing. But my mother's half-brother was kind of a rounder, and he had killed somebody and been in jail.
Oh.
And this was in the Canadian Record here last year sometime. But anyway, he and my dad had always got along. He couldn't get along with very many people. And just one day it clicked, and he got on to my dad and told him he was going to kill him. And that's when he said, well, we're moving. And And I can remember him in an old stripped-down car going up the hill there at Allison, Texas, and standing up with a gun pointed at us.
Oh, my.
So
that's why you moved. And when you moved from, well, when you graduated from Spearman, you said that you went to start your family, but when did you move to Woodward?
What year was it that my kids grew up, I got a divorce, and I went to nurse's school, and I went to Dallas for a couple of years and lived and worked in a nursing home. And that's where I wanted to work, in a nursing home. And so then my ex had a major stroke, and the kids were trying to take care of him, and I felt bad, so I came back and helped take care of him. And then I went to work out here at Colonial Manor, and I worked out there for, 10 years or so. I was director out there, and then I quit and took care of him for 2 years, and then he passed away. And then that was in, what year? Let me think. He died in 90. Must have been about 88, somewhere along there when I came back.
Yeah.
I graduated from nursing school in 79, and then I worked at Colonial Manor for several years, and then I took care of him for a couple of years. And
there's a name I've not heard in a long time, Colonial Manor.
Do you remember when it was a nursing home?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I bet. When you said Howeiler, I took care of a lady that was a Howeiler. Martha, I think.
Martha was a great aunt.
Okay. I figured her relative.
Yeah, with that last name. So,
yeah.
So unique as it is.
And I love doing that. And then I took a foster girl. Well, after I took care of him, I kind of hit and missed. I worked at Canton, drove back and forth, and took care of just an individual. And then I went to work at Moreland for a while. And they asked me, well, I was put down as a reference to the manager for a foster kid. And they said, why don't you do this? And I thought, well, I'm getting old enough to think I will. And so I put my application in. I got a foster girl, and I had her for 25 years. And then they decided I was too old, so they took her away from me. And, that was interesting. We could do what we wanted to. And
was she somebody that was going to need care for the rest of her life?
She was 18 when I got her, and she was pretty well self-sufficient.
Okay.
And we went on a lot of trips. We went to see some of her family in Florida, and just Yellowstone and a lot of things. And I still stay in contact with her.
Yeah, I was about to ask. I mean, you probably...
And she still calls me Mom.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's cool.
And then I lost my youngest daughter in 14. And you probably knew the Rittenhouses.
Oh, yeah.
Rick.
Yeah.
That was my son-in-law.
Oh, okay.
And Shelley was my youngest daughter. So that was a bad time.
Yeah, I'm sure. My dad always says, like, you're supposed to bury me, not the other way around.
Right,
okay?
exactly.
So,
let's see. Back to school, there was one other thing that I was going to say that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
My first grade, I think I was a skinny little thing, probably looked sickly. I don't know. But my teacher got a basket of fresh fruit from California from her brother. And she slipped me off somewhere one time and said, I'm going to send some of this home with you because I think you need fresh fruit and vegetables. And she sent me a lot of her oranges and grapefruit. And I thought that was neat. And then my second, and I didn't have a third, my fourth and fifth grade were all in the same room and the same teacher. And she had taught my mom in school.
Oh, wow. Was this a one-room schoolhouse, or was this
No,
actually it was a school?
In Allison, Texas. And Allison, there's not much there now.
I was like, do you know how big it was then when you were going to school there? Or?
It had a bank and a couple of grocery stores because the bank got robbed during that time.
Oh.
And
dang. I think that there was a lot of that kind of going on, though.
And then to the butchering, we didn't get into that either, the pigs and things.
Mm-hmm.
That was a neighborhood thing, and they would get an old barrel and heat the water in it. It'd be pretty full, and they'd lean it over. It was leaned over about like that. Then the guys would get the pig and push down in that hot water, and then they'd scrape it.
Yeah.
And then they had an old smokehouse that they would cut it up and cure the meat. And then there was an old black kettle that they would use to render the lard in out of the fat. And then they would, then the cracklings they would make soap out of. And that's how we did our laundry. And I can remember my mom, I jumped from one thing to another, but I can remember her washing on the board. I've still got the washboard that she washed on. And then we got a machine, Maytag, that you kick-started. And that, and I never had electricity or a bathroom until I think it was 49 when we moved into town at Spearman and bought a house. And
so when you made that move to Spearman, you were still living on a farm.
Yeah, my dad went to Spearman during harvest and kind of worked.
Oh, I see.
And he kind of knew the people there. And he met this guy, and he gave him a place to live, and then hired him to be his helper.
Oh.
And then we moved from there a little farther on out in the country. We were 20 miles out from Spearman. And then my dad started farming, and he had a bumper wheat crop in I don't know what year it was, really good. And no insurance. And it came a hail the night before he was going to start harvesting and just wiped it out. And I said, I'll never be a farmer's wife. And I haven't. And then we moved to another house across the road, and then we eventually bought that house. And we lived there, I don't know, several years. I rode the bus like 20 or 30 miles. And then we sold that house, traded it for one in town, and we moved to town and had our first bathroom.
And so in 49, I don't do math real well. That would have made you...
I was
17.
Yeah, wow. So you were almost 18 years old before you had a bathroom. People just think about that. When you're having a bad day, that's what I try to do, because we're so blessed in today's day and age with all these amenities. I feel like,
I know.
The era that you grew up in, we need to,
stop back and think.
Yeah. Or maybe we should send all the bad kids to a place that is like the dirty 30s and depression and let them live like that for about a month. I think that's... I've thought about this, obviously, thoroughly, but...
Well, it was, I have no regrets about it.
Sure, it made you who you are today, and I think that's wonderful.
And, and I was, like that Cradle Roll certificate when I was 2 years old. They had revivals there, and the preachers would always stay with my Taylor family that lives on them. And one of the cousins still has that place.
Oh, that's cool. Still in the family.
It's still there.
Oh, that's good.
And then one tragedy happened during those years. This was when Mother was pregnant with me. I think he was, whether he was 16 or what, but a bunch of boys went swimming one of the little ponds, and he drowned. And she was one that later went to California, but she wanted to be brought back, and she is buried by him at White Rose Cemetery. And then, I don't know, we'd go back to the Taylor farm, and that was our home place, along with the one at Allison. I make a trip down there about at least once a year, go to the cemetery.
Right.
And but what I started to say about they'd have revivals at Allison, Brush Arbor revivals, and my grandma, mother, sister, and I. And Grandma was an excellent mule driver, and I can still see her today in that polka dot dress and her hat on, and she'd stand up and she'd whip them old mules, feet and toe, and away we'd go. And then we'd come back in the night. Revivals. Church didn't last just an hour. Sometimes it'd be midnight, and all you could hear was the clippity clop. But anyway, we could hear the coyotes howling and the clippity clop of the mules, and we had a good service. And
well, how did you find your way back without?
Yeah,
I mean, you had a lantern or something on the wagon, I presume.
No, the mules.
The mules know where to go, huh? Yeah,
of course.
The mules took us home.
Yep, that's exactly right.
They knew the path, huh?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And that's another thing, back to the Dust Bowl days. I remember my cousin on the Taylor farm was out in the pasture when that black duster came in, and he was lost. He didn't know how to get in, and he got a hold of an old cow's tail, and she took him home.
Oh, wow. Animals are amazing in that way.
They are.
Where they can know where to go just by their other senses, where we, on the other hand, we need to see. We can't just sniff our way home.
No, we can't.
Which would have been cool if we could. But so, are there any other memories from specifically the Dust Bowl days that you?
They like the war came in, and I remember, of course, that was Pearl Harbor Day in 1941, and I was 9 years old. And I heard it at school. And I went home and told my parents that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And, that's the first they knew about it. And I had never seen an airplane before. And they started once in a while, they'd fly over. And then when I said the train whistle, they would come through at night with that forlorn whistle. There was a train that ran from Clinton to Pampa, about, I don't know whether it was even a mile from our place there in Texas. And it'd go up and come back the same day. There was an old lady at Raiden that rode the train every day or so just for the trip.
Oh, wow.
And, they went through at night, different trains. And I'm sure they were hauling soldiers or something, but I can, even over here at the apartments, I hear this train out here once in a while, and it flashes back, like, because it was scary, kind of.
Yeah. I remember when we were chatting the other day, and we had just kind of experienced here recently in Oklahoma some pretty crazy winds and some pretty heavy dust that we're not used to. And you had said that hearing that wind and mind you, the dust we had here recently didn't hold a candle to what you remember experiencing, but it definitely gives you flashbacks about that you were saying.
And you're not even thinking about it, and then something like that triggers it.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, this is that similar feeling or sensation of that time in your life.
And I don't know. I made a lot of notes, but I've covered most of the main ones, I think.
Your books, are those available anywhere?
That place went bankrupt.
Oh,
that you had them printed at.
And I wish people could still buy them. Most of my cousins got one.
Yeah.
And I think I give my kids one like that. And then the two that I made for the Taylors and 2 for the Tomlinsons. And then these, that trip I made to California, I made a book about that. And that was my hostess gift that I gave.
Nice.
And that was a neat trip.
Mm-hmm. And Mikey tells me that you write poetry.
Right. Some.
Yeah. And
If I had started over, I'd probably write books. But
yeah. I understand. I actually have.
Do you have the whole thing?
I have the whole thing. And so I'm going to go ahead and read it, since I feel like we've kind of touched on everything that we wanted to talk about, your experiences and your life in general, but also the Dust Bowl.
Very amateur.
Oh, no, poetry can be whatever poetry wants
and
to
when
be.
I
That's the beauty
did
of
those,
it.
I just woke up in the night and thought about it and did it real quick.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
That's sometimes how I write a lot of my poetry, but not always. Not always. But I know what you're saying, where it just kind of comes to you and you just start, and it's so easy. But this is Jeanie Thorn's poem, The 80-Year Journey, and I'm going to read that one, and then she's actually added on a couple since, now she's 92, so she's added on to it. So I'll stop and then, tell you when I'm reading the rest. But this is The 80-Year Journey. It all started on September 28th, 1932. I've ridden in mule-drawn wagons, then in old cars, and now new. Airplanes started flying around, then came the rocket, too. It was great to see the first man land on the moon, making me wish I could see the same beautiful view. A lot of good food was cooked on the old wood cook stove. We had kerosene, butane, electric, and finally came along the microwave. All were trying our time to save. Now it's a package or a mix. The meal is already to fix. Faster and faster we go, and the less time we have to show. Washboards and made tags, laundromats too. Soon the washer and dryer moved right in without any snags. Sad irons, glad ones, especially when we were through. Onto gas, electric, and now it's wash and wear with never a care. Outhouses, Sears catalogs, potties. When it was cold at night, maybe sometimes out behind the barn out of sight. Soon before we knew, a room all modern and new had been added with stool and tub. No more waiting our turn on Saturday. It was a bath every night. Diapers were washed and hung out to dry in the breeze, but in the winter they would surely freeze. Today to Walmart we will dash just to get a new pack, where there is a never-ending stack. Just make sure we don't overload the trash. Times have come and gone, but the longer we live, the more we know. No matter how fast or how slow, it won't last. The best thing in life is not our stuff, but the love of God, family, and friends, when we finish the journey at last. Traveling is something I love to do, and I've enjoyed every view. I've been blessed during this 80 years to travel many places and see much of our land. 38 states, and so many times, along with Canada, Mexico, and Washington, D.C., which was so grand. I've traveled by wagon, car, buses, and train, flown oh so high in a big old plane, crossed the Mississippi by land, river, rail, and by air, and I know firsthand that America is beautiful beyond compare. My computer has been one of my favorite hobbies. I loved selling on eBay for a while. I found the AFC Bible classes and took the challenge, earned 60 hours in ministry, making God and my Bible much easier to understand. And oh, so interesting and rewarding too. Digital scrapbooking is my latest challenge, a mod hobby that has made my ancestors seem more alive. Putting family history together with a face has helped it all fall into place. My 3 kids were great, and my grandkids were even greater. The greats have them all beat. The others can't even compete. Staying in touch with cousins, first, second, and even third, has been so wonderful, along with nieces and a nephew, too. I have also been blessed with an abundance of special friends. Each one of you have played your part in making my life complete. May God bless America and continue to bless each of you. And so that is the first
80
in
years.
the 80-year journey.
That was really good.
Yes, it was.
Thanks.
It was beautiful, talking about the different then and nows in a kind of fun, I think, way. And so then the addition to that she's added since, guess nothing is wrong, just another 10 years come and gone. Just like it was yesterday, I was 80, and now here I am 90. God has blessed me in so many ways. Good health, family, and friends have helped make my days. The world has changed, and not for the best. Electronics, politics, and COVID has put us all to the test. Good things have happened along with the bad. Losing my beautiful Shelley with her sweet smile was the worst of all by far. God, love, family, and good memories have kept me going mile by mile. Alicia was part of my life for 25 years. She moved on to better days, but I was sad. When she comes back to visit and still calls me mom, it makes me glad, and I know it was not all bad. Selling my house after 35 years and moving once more was quite a challenge. My apartment, though small, I've learned to adore. Making new friends has brought new blessings galore. I've learned that the earthly things are just stuff. Downsizing and selling wasn't so tough. Now it's Bible study in my apartment once a week, learning and teaching God's truth to seek. Weekly domino and card games has made my brain work and kept me on my toes. Ridge has joined our family to keep up the tradition. What a delight has been this addition. Taylor, the big sister, now has grown and matured along with Kylie and Carter too. Tatum, Brian, and 4 growing boys, Michael, Jalen, Dustin, and Sammy, have helped make our family complete. My favorite chore is making homemade ice cream really fast. Trying to fill 88 empty cups is not an easy task, because the first is empty before I can fill the last. I've learned not 1, but 2, and maybe sometimes 4. Vanilla, banana nut, maybe peach too, because they always want more. Travel is still a favorite thing to do. Trips to California, sights to see, cousins to enjoy, and making memories beyond compare. Trips to Colorado with grandkids. What fun and so much beauty to behold. Another to see nieces, nephews, and brother-in-law, Dawn too. All were worth their weight in gold. Branson several times with friends, ready to spend our last dime. Shows, shopping, and good food we're always ready to eat. Visiting with cousins in our spare time. My 70-year class reunion to Spearman, Texas, we did go. My, how time has flown, renewing old friendships and making new memories. Was a treasure to savor before we had to go. New Mexico was another for a special cousin memorial service. A sad time, but good to meet cousins young and old with new stories to be told. Many short trips and hoping many more to come. I've learned our times are in His hands, our early years, our middle years, and our later years. No time is better or greater than another for all of our years. Work together for God's marvelous plan for our lives. I will say again, like I said at 80, I wouldn't take for 90-year journey lessons learned and so many memories made. I love my family, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, nieces, nephews, cousins galore, in just about every town you can explore, and many, many special friends. Each one of you have played a part in my life to make it complete. Thanks to each of you. May God bless and keep you all in the shelter of His arms and in the palms of His hands. Forever, love to all of my friends and family. That's so special, because it's not just a poem and done poetically, but it's kind of a testament to the changes of life and 90
And it
years
does, yeah.
and your family and your friends. So,
And I have had some really good friends along the way. And then I had my DNA done, and I've gained 14 cousins.
oh wow.
Wow.
It's been kind of neat.
Yeah, that is neat. That is neat. Well, Jeanie, it's been just a real pleasure getting to talk with you today about your 92 years on this earth and your experiences through some of the, biggest and historical things to happen in not just America, but in Oklahoma and Texas and that part of the world that we so all hold dear. Because I actually have, my own special ties to Texas as well, because I lived really close. We both Texas and Oklahoma. I just lived 60 miles north in a little town in Kansas. And so,
What town was
it's
that?
called Protection.
Okay. I went to Greensboro one day last week.
Well, that's where my grandma lives.
Was she there during the tornado?
No, she, at the time of the tornado, was my senior year of high school, and my grandma was living in Protection still. they actually lived in my grandpa's Granny B's house. So he had bought it from her estate, and then they ended up living in it. And then when he passed away and she needed to downsize, and she found a little apartment in Greensburg. And so she moved there about 3 years ago. So she's only been there for about 3 years, but she loves it, and we go visit her there. So,
Well, I've got another story, I
yeah,
won't
go
keep your
ahead.
time
No,
very long,
you're welcome to say.
about Greensboro.
Mm-hmm.
My grandson and his family live in Mays or Wichita.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd wanted me to come up and spend the weekend. And I had been to that, do y'all need to go? Or
No, you're fine.
And I had been to that museum in Greensboro.
Mm-hmm.
So my plans were to go to through Greensboro and spend the afternoon because they both worked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got 10 miles out of town. I had a blowout.
Oh.
And on brand new tires.
Yeah.
So I called my son-in-law, Rick, and he came. And by the time we changed tires and everything, it was getting late in the afternoon. And I said, I don't think I'm supposed to go. I think I'll stay and cancel my room reservation and just go home. Turned the news on, and it had blown that town away.
Oh, wow. You were supposed to be there that day.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I would have been.
You would have been there. That's wild. That doesn't make your hair stand up on your neck. I don't know what does. Yeah, I had a teacher that taught at the school in Coldwater, and she actually lost most of her house, but everybody was fine. Well, here's another one that she's written.
I didn't really write that one. I don't know where it came from. I'd like to say I did, but I didn't.
Oh, okay. So this is maybe a possibly anonymous one. It says, I am strong because I know my weakness. I am compassionate because I have to suffer, or let me start over. I am strong because I know my weakness. I am compassionate because I too have suffered. I am alive because I am a fighter. I am wise because I've been foolish. I can laugh because I have known sadness. I can love because I've known loss. I'm a strong woman who has weathered the storm but still loves to dance in the rain. I love that. And that does sound like something I've heard before. And, a true testament to anybody that's lived so much life like you.
92 years without having ups and downs and mountains and all that. So.
Sure.
I think right in the back of one of these books, I just added that picture of me and just found that road.
Okay, all right. And the picture of you. The road of life is full of twists and turns, potholes, detours, and railroad crossings. Sometimes we climb a steep mountain path to be rewarded by a breathtaking vista before us. Other times we miss a turn to find ourselves disoriented and frightened. No matter where you find yourself on the road of life today, the most important navigation tool can carry with you is your attitude. There are so many roads of life as there are individuals to travel them. May yours be paved with success, happiness, and love. I've enjoyed my trip. Jeanie Thorn. Well, and you're still taking a trip. You're still doing all the things, like agreeing to do this podcast, and she's never done a podcast before.
I haven't. So tell me about it now.
Yeah, well, we'll have to tell you a little bit more here after we wrap up, so we can wrap up the episode. But again, we thank you so much for joining us and sharing your life story.
You.
I love to talk history, and I love to talk about my life. And
good. And we enjoyed having you.
I can talk all day about it. Okay. Add new things.
Okay, Mikey, this was great podcasting. We want to thank our guest, Jeanie Thorn, for agreeing to come on this podcast and sharing the history of her storied past. If you have questions or want to make a suggestion for a podcast episode, you can email us at mr.robin@mrrobinshood.com or mikey@mrrobinshood.com. As always, you can also reach out to Mikey or me via Podophone at 580-827-0472. If you just want to get something off your chest, we're not likely to answer because we're quickly becoming international podcast stars, but don't have the dough to hire staff yet. But you can leave a voicemail. Text us if you have a question, concern, complaint, compliment, suggestion, whatever. One of the things we're hoping to do in 2025 is offer a podcast internship. If you'd like to work with a couple of seasoned podcasting pros, give us a call or email us. I think we're probably looking for someone pursuing a mass communications or broadcast journalism major. We won't be paying a salary, but we offer a monthly stipend. We'll also pay mileage to from wherever we're broadcasting from. There are free drinks and food at least once a month when we record the episodes. We need help with maintaining the podcast schedule, booking podcast guests, and possibly down the road editing the recorded episodes and even running the board. So please give us a call or drop us an email if you're interested. In the meantime, tell all your friends to listen to this podcast as though their lives depend upon it. As always, you can stream or download episodes of Mr. Robin's Hood podcast wherever you usually find that sort of nonsense. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, Player FM, Listen Notes, and Podchaser. You can also stream them directly from our Podbean website at mrrobinshoodpodcast.podbean.com. And you can do it for free. So we'll wrap this up as we always do and remind you to stay hungry,
stay foolish, and most importantly, stay weird. Bye, everyone.
Everybody.